Thanks for joining the Chris Spangle Show. I am so glad to be with you today, and this is a conversation that I had with Chuck Pullen and Bob Starkey on WJOB 1230 AM up in Lake County, Indiana, which features Gary, Indiana. I think they're in like Hammond, which is a little nicer. This is the Fall of Chuck and Bob show, and they invited me on to basically give the libertarian critique of Republicans and Democrats in this moment. Talk a little bit about the White House, talk a little bit about the No Kings rallies. So stay tuned. I think you're going to like it. Let's jump right into the show.
So why don't we jump in, see if we can hear our Zoom guests. Go ahead, bring them in. Chris, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Chuck. Can you hear me?
Do you hear him? I can't hear him. Chris, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? And soon they'll hear all of us.
I can hear. We can hear each other. Go ahead, put him on the screen. Let's see him. Is that working too?
Look at that handsome man.
That's a real studio. See, that's a real studio.
Look at that. We need brick here at our studio.
We need bricks and ferns. That's what we're missing here.
This is a podcast studio here in Indianapolis, Indiana. Can you hear me now? All I see is this producer.
We're just going to bring you up a little bit.
This producer is very handsome, but he's scrambling. He's sweating. I started out as a radio show producer. I know the feeling. He's got the intense stare in his eye. He's nervous.
So that's Joe, and Joe is doing the work of like three people. So he's producing the video, the audio, rolling breaks, and we have this constant argument with the station owner about the ergonomics of being a producer. You can't be flying across the room on a chair all day long. You need to have everything lined up.
Yeah, well, God forbid any of the on-air talent do anything.
I'm more than willing to do that.
Look at me. I mean, I'm here. You expect me to get up?
As a 15-year veteran of radio producer land, the on-air talent is it's a very cushy job, people. No wonder Bob Starkey wanted to do it.
Hey, did you just hear me? I just did traffic and weather. I said everything is great on the roads. I said the weather's great. Everything was fantastic.
It was much more professional than I expected.
Well, thank you. That's all I wanted to hear, really. So
that is the first and only time those words will ever be uttered.
That's kind of like my other producer. He says this is the second favorite show, and then we realize she only produces 2 shows. So, but okay.
And one of them is
tell people about you. What do you do?
So I am a podcaster on the Chris Spangle Show. Run the We Are Libertarians podcast network. I have been in radio for 20 years. I guess I'm sort of not in radio anymore. I was with the Bob and Tom Show for 11 years. I work at a local newspaper here in Indianapolis now as their head of podcasting. And I am a libertarian frozen in time. I am a 2009 libertarian, and I'm not changing.
Okay, so that's where I want to. We're jumping right in with that. So, you and I have been having these complicated debates about some of these issues.
It's not that complicated. I'm right and you're wrong.
That's why it's complicated.
Right.
So we've been talking all morning to our different. We have a nice cavalcade of callers on the left and on the right, and so like for instance, our last caller just called to tell us that President Trump is indiscriminately blowing up boats. Some of them may have drugs, most of them don't, and so in his perspective, the president is just indiscriminately drone striking fishing boats. And that's what's happening. So, I mean, like when I hear that, I immediately explain to him that indiscriminate drone strikes go back past the Obama administration, the Bush administration. This is nothing new. And this is something that I keep asking Chris Spangle for the last couple of weeks. I ask him the question, why now? Why are people paying attention now when people like he and I have been talking about this for years? So I guess that's where I want to start off, Chris. Why do you think people are paying attention now more than ever?
Well, I mean, you could say, well, why are Republicans not paying attention to certain things like the debt, for instance, right? It's basic tribalism. Abdul, who I produced for, Abdul Hakim Shabazz here in Indy, in 2004, used to have a saying that over the 4 years that I produced his morning show in local radio, he would say, well, what else is new? Put down your sign, walk across the street, pick up the other guy's sign, and start protesting that other side. Like, if you're looking for consistency in American politics, you're not going to find it. We're entering the 250th year celebrating the Declaration of Independence, where all men are created equal, penned by a man who owned other people. So hypocrisy is like baked into the cake of American politics. Like It's just part of it. And so what I always talk about on the Chris Spangle show is that you have to go back to principles. Like when things are very confusing and very overwhelming, you have to really get in touch with what you believe. And for me as a libertarian, I look at everything through the lens of power. Who has power? Why do they have power? How are they using power? What's the end goal of them having power? And that usually puts you on a very consistent side, like Rand Paul on this particular issue is very consistent. You have to have due process. You can't just say, if you're the president of the United States, I have whatever power I want to have. I can just indiscriminately kill whoever I want to kill. I should have this power. And it doesn't matter if he has an R or a D next to his name. You don't get the right to attack another country or their people without congressional approval. That's written into the Constitution, but this is just an ongoing feature of American politics in the last 30 years in that the executive branch is centralizing as much power as possible, and at a certain point where we have to put a stop to it, or else we're not going to have the power to put a stop to it.
And it was funny because I actually brought up Rand Paul. I said to the caller, I said, you know that Rand Paul filibustered for 10 hours about 10 years ago to talk about this very issue, about the use of drones, specifically on American soil, but using drones in this capacity. And the problem was, at the time, 10 years ago, who was paying attention to Rand Paul? People like you and I, the libertarians, were paying close attention because we knew this would be an issue, and everybody else kind of ignored Rand Paul. And now today, once again, why now, 10 years later, now people are paying attention to what they consider the president drone striking indiscriminately, fishing boats, even though I just brought up the fact that President Obama blew up an entire wedding in Yemen, and et cetera, et cetera. So again, that becomes what I don't understand.
So what are you mad about? Are you mad about Democrats finally getting it right?
Well, so going back to your principles, though, you're saying, what are the principles? Are we going to finally see a scenario? And this is what I say, Chris, you remember like even during COVID. So we had libertarians, we were protesting outside the governor's mansion. And who was there with us? We had, Trump supporters with their pickup trucks surrounding the governor's mansion, Hunker Down Holcomb and things like that. The question becomes, where are the principles to say when, and this is what I always go back to. If you want government to have less power, the only time you can do that is when your party is in power. I'll use a perfect example. One of our other callers earlier today was talking about these DUIs and legislative immunity. So he was talking about this, the DUI that's come out, and let me pull it up real quick. So we were just talking about the legislative immunity that, and again, you had 4 or 5 different legislators here in the state that have gotten DUIs in the last few years because they have this immunity. And so again, same idea. Why are you surprised that if legislators give themselves legislative immunity, that they go and commit DUIs because they know they can get away with it? So again, it's that same idea of when you have the power, that is the time to say, hey, maybe we should have less power. And that's the problem. It never happens. Like you said, a nation formed by hypocrisy. So that becomes the question is, are these people that were protesting, the No Kings protesters, are they going to continue to protest the power when Democrats get it back? No, of course not. The Republicans will take to the streets.
Well, I don't know that you can say that. I don't know that you can say that for certain because you and I both have probably changed and evolved. I mean, I supported Bush. I was in 2005, 2004, college Republicans chair, supported the Iraq War wholly and heartily. I planned a pro-war rally on the Friday after Thanksgiving in 2003. And then over the course of the 2000s evolved to a very anti-war position. And I think part of it is that you are exposed to other ideas. You're exposed. And this is where I find it a bit frustrating and a little bit of a trick in order to give Trump an out in terms of his violations of the centralization of power, to say, why now? Why are these Democrats doing the right thing now? Why don't we get engaged with the people who are finally saying, hey, maybe centralized power is the wrong thing, and start leading them to a more libertarian position? Because that's what happened with the right wing. That's what happened with Trump's MAGA movement is they became more anti-war. You know, back in the day when I knew War Crimes Bob Starkey, I mean, he was probably super hard pro-war, pro-death of anyone, firing as many bombs as possible, but then he fell in with libertarians like you and I and heard maybe we should have these things, this things, maybe I was being propagandized by these things. And I think when you constantly, not you, but the royal you, as the right wing constantly want to put a thumb on Democrats and liberals, they stop listening to you and they stop seeing a point of view. Whereas if you talk to the other side like they're people with malleable opinions who can see other things as opposed to like some leftist Borg that you're going to be assimilated into, as opposed to a group of people that can have their minds changed, you're going to lose. Like, you're going to just drive those people into the arms of AOC, Bernie Sanders, and other people.
And Mamdani, and they all got together and met in New York over the weekend.
I think we are far more likely and I'm a creature of the right. No matter, I mean, you can watch my Facebook page, call me woke, whatever you want, but I am Republican adjacent. I always will be, much to the chagrin of my friends that I have on the left. But I've had a lot of success over the last half a decade talking to people on the left about libertarian views and about the nature of power. And they're with us in a lot of different avenues. It's just that they feel so threatened by the other side that they don't really trust that less power could be possible. And you certainly see that on the right. We're now in a situation where nobody wants to talk to each other, so everybody's fighting for the gun to put it to the head of the other guy so they don't get their brains blown out. And that's a very dangerous situation for a country.
Okay, so I wanted to read, I found this tweet, because this is exactly my take on this, is no kings, they shouted as they begged their government to take control of their healthcare, retirement, finances, and their children's education. So, I mean, this becomes the question, is this a no kings protest or is this a not your kings protest? I mean, and that's sort of the argument. I understand where you're saying this idea of this is the time where libertarians and the left can come together. But the reality is, like I just said, they, AOC and Bernie were with Mamdani over the weekend rallying for what he wants to do to New York, which is frankly more government grocery stores and more government influence. So they're not protesting no kings, they're protesting not your kings, right? So, I mean, that becomes the question is you're asking these people to go from a scenario where they're trying to trade one type of authority for another and saying, look, you don't need authority at all. You don't need any kings. And that's sort of where I'm at with this is I was talking earlier with one of our other callers. We were talking about the idea of I'm looking for grievances here. I'm looking for an organized list of grievances from these people. And one of the things I was saying earlier is imagine going back to like Martin Luther, if he had, been wearing a giant inflatable dinosaur costume while he was nailing his 95 grievances to the church door, or Franklin when he was presenting the grievances to the king. Like, this is the problem that I'm having with the left is that they don't have any sort of organized, it's just sort of like they're screaming all these, we called it sort of the hobo chili stew of grievances. They don't really have anything organized where, how do you fix a problem if you can't tell me what it is? And that's where I'm at with this.
Well, the inflatable costumes, that comes from the protesters. And I wish I could remember the name of the book. Dandelion Insurrection is popping in my mind, but I'm not sure if that's it. But like the protesters against the power grab of Milosevic in the 90s, he was toppled by a group of protesters who used comedy and absurdity to highlight the power grab, but also how like weak and performative that was. And so like we can look at the people in inflatable costumes, but it has a purpose. Like you're pepper spraying somebody in a frog costume, and it's got a very distinct purpose. But to go to the No Kings rally, you are conveniently ignoring that Donald Trump is doing everything possible to centralize power. And this is the problem with the right. Like you're saying, if you want to reduce the size and scope of government, you've got to do it while your side's in power. And if you lean right, you should be disturbed by the way that Donald Trump conducts his government. He views the government as his property, and he views the people that lives inside of it as his property. And if Barack Obama and Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton and all the rest also viewed it that way, it doesn't mean that two wrongs make a right. It it means that you should rightly look at Donald Trump as a threat to your self-government, to your sovereignty as a United States citizen. And to give up the fight against the centralization of power is un-American. And as we move into the 250th anniversary of the founding of the Declaration of Independence, we should embrace the natural rights tradition. We should embrace self-government. We should embrace limited government and the federal system where the federal government doesn't have all the power, and that the president doesn't view his role as a person who should take on the media, the universities, the military, and anyone that can really check his power, any institution that has the ability to thwart the centralization of federal power. That should be disturbing, and that's really what it comes down to with the No Kings protests. You can throw it into policies, and yes, I agree with you, and yes, let's all go towards Mamdani because he's well-spoken. Meanwhile, he's going to bankrupt the city of New York like Dinkins did, the other DSA candidate that won. But the fact of the matter is that the No Kings protest is really protesting the approach to government that Donald Trump has. He thinks he can tear down the East Wing of the White House without having the National Capital Planning Commission approve it like every other president did. It's his house. He owns it. Well, no, that's not the case. You don't own federal property. You are a guest, and you're there to preserve it. You're there to steward it. And Donald Trump doesn't look at anything from the lens of stewardship, as many other government officials in the past have. You and I can argue that, but you know why Donald Trump is special. That's why most people love Donald Trump on the right, because he is a person that pokes and prods and puts his finger in the eye of the people that you don't like. That's not a good way to govern. It's not a way that is going to win for libertarianism or conservatism. It's only going to serve to make the likelihood of AOC and Mamdani having power more likely because of backlash. In American politics, there is always a backlash to every action that is taken. And there's always a pendulum that swings. And the harder you go right, the further they'll go left. And neither side is making us more free. And I don't find any reason that we ought to be making excuses for Donald Trump.
Okay, so I also use the pendulum analogy quite a bit. And what I'm starting to see, though, is I imagine this scenario where I almost see the pendulum, instead of swinging back and forth as it tends to do in this country, I'm almost seeing a scenario where the pendulum is just going to sort of break in half, and half's going to go right and half's going to go left. And you're right, Mamdani is a perfect example of that. The AOC, the Bernie, that whole group in New York is a perfect example of that. But also the idea that, Gavin Newsom has his intentions on the White House, J.B. Pritzker has his sights set on the White House, and so neither one of those guys are going to work with President Trump on anything sort of cohesive to figure out a plan when it comes to dealing with ICE in their states or anything like that. So this becomes the inherent thing is, what I ask someone like you that's been paying attention for all these years, why are we shocked that Trump is doing what he's doing? And this is my point. Earlier today, I was talking about the debt. We're talking about the idea that, the last time that we're going to see anybody even attempt to address the debt was Elon Musk, and people literally burned down his cars and his dealerships for trying to rein in spending. And so this idea that there's any real effort to rein in the debt, or even the idea that Rand Paul got very little traction when he ran for president. The idea is these people do not want a Rand Paul. These people do not want an Elon Musk to come in and rein in government spending. Both sides want this unbridled spending, and they also want their version of king. So again, all these people that are outraged by Trump, I said, well, good news. The next guy is probably going to be worse, whether he's on the left or the right. So that becomes the inherent question is, for those of us that have been paying attention for all of these years, why are you surprised? But then also that becomes the question of, do you really believe? Like, for instance, we've been talking back and forth about the ballroom and Trump's third term. I mean, is that the next phase of this? Is you're going to have a president, whether it's Trump or the next guy, going, you know what, I'm not leaving. I mean, is that where we're headed? Is that what's going to eventually, set things off? I don't know. And so that's kind of the question. I mean, do you really think that Trump is not going to leave?
Yeah, 100% he's not going to leave. He tried not to leave last time. Remember the Kraken and the 128 lawsuits that were filed, that he filed saying, well, the election was stolen, and then he had no evidence of it? Like, Donald Trump has already tried not to leave. He claimed the 2016 election was rigged. Like, Donald Trump's entire, you want to argue why now? Read history. Go read about Duterte in the Philippines. Like, he rode to power on the extrajudicial killings of drug dealers. And what happened in the country is that it evolved to people killing their neighbor because they just claimed they were drug dealers, and they didn't have to go through the process of actually having formal charges and due process. And so you ended up with basically a reversion to what we had in tribal killings in England, which led to the development of the rule of law under King Alfred. So the right talks a lot about preserving Western culture and Western civilization, but Western civilization is the rule of law. It is that the person that wakes up that has the biggest gun doesn't get to rule over other people. The system of checks and balances rule over the whims of people that want to centralize power. I don't think any Republican with an honest, straight face can look at Donald Trump's presidencies and say that he hasn't done these things to an order of magnitude over what Democratic politicians have done. That's part of why you like him. Just be honest about it. And so, yes, you're right. We're now in a position where if you listen to Steve Bannon, who I think is a very credible person in terms of how his movement thinks, like the MAGA movement is not a libertarian movement. They're not trying to preserve the natural rights tradition. They're not trying to make government smaller. They're trying to maintain power because what they understand is exactly what you're saying. And so if somebody's going to have permanent power and lock up the other side, it might as well be us. And I'm not going to be the one to advocate for that system. I don't care if it makes me unpopular. I don't care if it makes me get called a lib by you on Facebook. It doesn't matter to me because you're not going to have in 50 years my great-grandchildren look back and say, I argued for the breaking of the Constitution and the breaking of the American system. It doesn't matter which side wins. And I think people have to start waking up and having a duty to the American Constitution and an awareness that they're arguing for the breaking of the entire system, and we end up in a banana republic where no matter who wins, the other side goes to jail. And guess what? We live in a much poorer, worse country. Like if you listen to my show and you listen to the series of immigrants that I talked to over this past summer, they moved here because of the abundance of choice, the freedom to choose where you go to school, the freedom to say what you want without persecution, the economic opportunity that we have because we're not burdened by socialism. Most of them are from South America, and they support Donald Trump over the left because they saw how socialists destroyed their country, but they're also alarmed at the movement of the right towards fascism. And so you can change culture by advocating for what's right. Even if you're unpopular, if you were during COVID and you were saying, look, maybe the public health system isn't right, and maybe this shot isn't going to solve COVID, and maybe we should be skeptical about these things. You weren't popular, but you were born out right. And the same thing has to start applying to government power. You have to start fighting power where it is centralized and when it has power over you. Because if you don't, you're not going to have the ability to do that for very long. It doesn't matter which side wins.
Okay, so we're going to let you go in a minute. Callers, if you guys want to call in, you get your say on this. Bob, if you want to respond, you have the official Republican response to what Chris had to say. But I do want to ask Chris one question before he goes then. Okay, so we have this scenario that you believe is playing out where Trump is not going to leave. Now, obviously, last time, there was this discussion about votes and 2 a.m. votes and the dead people voting, all these things. What is going to be his excuse for not leaving? And if he does refuse to leave, what do you expect the Republican response is going to be? And again, we can even roll that into what's happening right now in Indianapolis with the idea of we've got Trump pressuring our governor to, do this redistricting and things like this. Do the Republicans fold? What happens when he refuses to leave?
I mean, a decade of Republicans folding tells you they're going to fold. Right. Like I don't expect backbone from Republicans at this point. Like it's the craziest thing to me. How do
they justify it is my point though. How do they justify not letting?
It doesn't matter how they justify it. If you look at like Diego Morales, our Secretary of State here in Indiana, just put out he did a study trying to find illegal immigrants that voted illegally in Indiana, and he found like one. And so it doesn't matter what the truth is. If you can propagandize your way through and just assert that you're right, and then it gives a permission structure to your side to say, yeah, that's the truth. I believe this version of the truth. Like, we already saw it. He already said that the election was stolen from him in 2020, and he has no evidence to back that up. And yet the majority of Republicans believe that. And you see in the Indiana General Assembly, the fear of losing power is why most of these guys are being silent. And I am so fed up with these. I can't curse because we're on radio.
Yeah, we're on real radio.
I'm so tired of Republicans privately saying how they're concerned about this and that, and then never going on the public record. Like, at least have some respect for Jim Lucas, who says, yeah, I'm not doing this. This is a power grab from DC to force the state. And then he goes, never mind, I'm changing my mind. Like, at least that guy is saying it out loud so we can judge him as a flip-flopper for all time. But like, this redistricting thing it's cheating, and everybody knows it's cheating. You want to put whatever facade you want on it and repeat it so Bob Starkey can get on radio and repeat it from the Republican side. And then it makes you all feel good because enough people have repeated it that you feel that it's the truth. It doesn't make it the truth. It's a permission structure. And so the dangerous part about people like Mitch Daniels is that a Mitch Daniels is a credible person that comes in and blows up the permission structure because he has the honesty to say, yeah, maybe we shouldn't let the president cheat, and we shouldn't participate in his cheating. And so then you have to call him a woke lib, and what happened to Mitch Daniels and all that, because...
Well, does he have, and this is the first time I do it, does he have the wherewithal to say what he's thinking, or does he have the permission from not needing the electorate anymore?
Well, of course, he's got himself, but he has always...
now that I don't need to get elected, I can say what I want. And so, yeah, it's real easy when they say, Mitch Daniels was against it, Mike Pence was against it, the two gentlemen that I know, and if they were here, I'm not speaking out of turn, two people who don't necessarily need to be too considerate of what the electorate thinks anymore. So,
Thomas Massey just had a massive fundraising haul from around the country because he has balls. So wouldn't it be amazing if our elected officials had that same chutzpah and actually said what they think that went counter to their party, and maybe you'd get like more than 33% of this country does not vote. Do you know why they don't vote? It's because they don't see their beliefs and they don't see any moral courage on the ballot. Libertarians do not steal from the right or left. They take about 10% equally from the Republican and Democratic candidate. They activate 90% of the voters, their voters, who see their belief system on, like, I don't care if you lose. Like, would you rather go down as Jeff Sessions, who lost his seat, or Jeff Flake, who lost their seat and kind of become irrelevant and cash in as a lobbyist, as opposed to being known as, like, just this, like a cheater? Like, people listening to your voice, you're going to live in a gerrymandered district like I'm going to live in a gerrymandered district. And I just look at it and go, yeah, maybe Illinois did it, but that doesn't mean I want us to become Illinois, because look at them. They can't keep businesses in Illinois because no one wants to live under their cockamamie schemes. Like, we should not become them.
So now here's a question that I have, and it's a legit question. If
I'm suspect of that, but go ahead.
Yeah, it's very sus. if we're doing this now and we decide to, as a state, to realign all the congressional districts so that they up, Congressional District 1, R plus 13 and or whatever it ends up being, and those things, if we're not just going to do that in 5 years, is the issue that we're doing it early, or is the issue that we're doing it at all? Because, again, we don't want to say, well, because Illinois did it, we're going to do it. You look at the congressional district maps of Indiana for the last 50 years, and they have been all sorts of wonky. We're at least somewhat cubed in where we draw our lines. So is the main issue that we are doing it at all to goose the number of Republicans in Washington, or is it the fact that we are doing it several years early?
It's the fact that you're doing it to disenfranchise Democratic voters. it's rigging the electorate to help a president maintain power. Like you cannot deny that Donald Trump is doing this because he wants to increase Republican votes, because if he gets a Democrat Congress, he will no longer have the ability to pursue his agenda in the same way. And so when you break that norm, guess what? Democrats are going to do that back to you. Like, it's not a guarantee that one side will take over and permanently rule. You could end up with Trump losing big in the midterms because he's overreached, and then in 2030 is fleeing to Argentina because he has a favorable administration there, and then all chaos breaks loose. Like, right? So it's not just that they're doing it early, it's that they're doing it so nakedly to empower a president. And it's just another example of Congress laying down for the executive branch. They have completely, we never were meant to have a parliamentary system, but we do. And that's why our system isn't working. It's because it's not a system of votes at the local, state, and federal level that constrains power. It's that we have basically a parliamentary system, and so you're thrown into this chaos that France is in the middle of. France has no ability to govern and yet has this massive socialist state, and so you end up with societal chaos because people can't plan. Businesses can't plan, individuals can't plan, and that's my problem with the government shutdown stuff and the Doge stuff. It's you have to have stability. Bob, I ended up being a Mitch Daniels Republican somewhere along the way. Give businesses the ability to plan, the favorable regulatory environment for them to grow, allow innovation in your areas, and eventually it will all work out to a freer, more stable society. But when you have presidents flying around the country trying to rig elections against the will of the people, against the will of the legislators who are just going to bite the bullet and do it because they don't want to be yelled at. I'm sorry, it's not just the timing, it's the end goal, and it's the precedent that you're going to set. And so, there's a funny story. Back in 2010, I was pretty close to Todd Rokita. And Todd Rokita put together this plan called Rethinking Redistricting. And if you Google Rethinking Redistricting PDF or Rethinking Redistricting LPIN, you can see the plan that I preserved because it mysteriously disappeared when Todd Rokita put out non-gerrymandered districts in Indiana. And we're pretty good compared to a lot of states, but he wanted to use software to make it very fair. And it made the legislators so mad he wasn't able to run for Senate in 2012. And as soon as Charlie White got into office, he deleted that from the earth. And then Charlie White went to jail for voting in a district in which he did not live. And the people at the time said, we can't have our chief election official doing that. Now we have our chief election official doing that, plus giving sweetheart deals to his family and doing all kinds of other crazy stuff. It's just, if you look at our politics, our standards are quickly eroding. And as a conservative, you've got to conserve standards and traditions. And when you blow them up, you tear up that fence. Well, that fence was there for a reason. And I think we should be alarmed at how much we've eroded our standards in the name of power.
Okay, so that voice, Chris Spangle, tell people where they can find you online, where they can watch your podcast and where they can see you.
Yeah, just look up The Chris Spangle Show. You can also look up We Are Libertarians, and you'll find all of our stuff there, and follow me on social media.
I appreciate it. Next time we'll have to bring Rob Kendall in. Bring you both in. It'll be all kinds of fun. So,
well, I
love you, buddy. I appreciate you getting up and joining us. We'll have to do it again soon, but I always appreciate your take on things.
All right. Thanks, Chuck.
Okay, you take care.
Bye.
Okay, that was Chris Spangle.